Everyone, and welcome to our second Learning Bite for February. Today's Learning Bite is a little bit different, as this is our first exuberant bite. And these exuberant bites allows us to showcase the talents within the procurement family. And I know there's lots out there, especially after yesterday's family call. So, if you have a passion for cooking, for writing, poetry, if you've written a book, or if you have any hobbies that you want to share, please let us know and we can include you in future sessions. Today, we're especially lucky to have Bob Newton, who heads up the Travel Meeting and Events production team, as he discusses his art, his inspirations, and sharing more of his creative journey with us. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping reminders. Can I ask you all to ensure that you're on mute just to avoid any background noise? Bob will take a pause for questions as he works his way through the slides, so please do share those questions by coming off mute or making use of the chat box. We will be recording the session and will share the slides with you. So without further ado, I now pass the baton over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate it. I'm going to see if I can spotlight myself here, if you guys can see me full screen. Let me know if you can't. As Nancy said, I'm Robert Newton. I lead the event production team under Travel Meeting and Events. I've just celebrated my 25th anniversary, so I've been with the firm for a while, and it's been quite a journey. I've worn several hats along the way, and that's kind of part of what I'm going to be talking about here today. And to be quite honest, I haven't spent a lot of time up until maybe a year or so ago really looking back at my art and my journey, but I'm looking forward to kind of sharing it with you guys. A lot of it has to do with EY, and I'm looking forward to kind of sharing some of the things that have inspired me along the way, and to talk about things that have helped me creatively evolve, I guess, through the years. And I still have a long way to go, but I'm looking forward to sharing my story with you. So what I'm going to try to do now is I'm going to try to share my PowerPoint and also have me where you can see me speaking at the same time. So bear with me. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to go to a full screen share. So give me 1 second. How's that? Can you see me in the slides?
Yes, we can see you, Robert.
Okay. We'll do that. Okay, so I've basically been an illustrator my whole life, as long as I can remember. And I mean, we all were illustrators. We're all artists at some point in our lives. Most people, once they get to 10 or 11, they kind of put that behind them. But we all kind of started out that way. I just kind of kept drawing, and it was something that was always very personal to me. I never had any aspirations about it. I just, it was just something that I felt a strong connection between the pen, pencil, and paper. And I remember when I was, I don't know, around 10 years old, one of my dad's friends saw that I was drawing all the time. He said, "Well, just one thing: don't ever, no matter how bad you think a drawing is, don't ever throw it away. Hold on to it. You can always look back and reflect on it. Think about it. Use it to evolve to better things, so forth." So from that point on, I just kind of took that to heart. So I've got basically journals and journals and journals of illustrations and drawings. Most of them I would never want to show anybody but it's just something that it's just kind of part of my history, and I appreciate that I do have all these things to look back on occasion. As Nancy said, if anybody has any questions along the way, feel free to stop and ask. So happy to answer anything as we progress. And I'll start off by sharing high school kind of a style that I had in high school. So I did a lot of portraiture. This is a Jimmy Page and Bob Dylan. I basically drew my surroundings. I'd be sitting in class, probably not paying attention to my teacher, drawing, the clock on the wall, or drawing, the bricks on the, in the classroom, and the books on the shelf and things like that. It was just something that was sort of inherent. Got in trouble a lot, but it was just something that I felt connected to. But I really got into portraiture, and in my 11th and 12th grade, I suppose. there was an incident I want to share with you. I'm going way back again to an incident in 1986 that, years later, looking back, was really kind of a pivotal moment with me in my art, and made me fully appreciate the therapeutic aspect of art. So I'm dating myself in a big way, but I was in January 1986. I was stationed on an aircraft carrier, the Dwight D. Eisenhower, and I, like many folks, saw the Challenger explosion, live on TV, and I did a drawing over the next 2 weeks. I remember leaning over a set of lockers, and I totally changed my style. I don't remember making a conscious effort or decision to say I'm going to change this style. I'm going to do this or that. I just did it, and basically what it was essentially was a drawing made up of dots. It's called pointillism. And I didn't, I didn't think about the disaster. I didn't think, I really didn't think about much, but just the emotion of going through that process. And it was, years later, looking back, I realized it was a way to cope with what I saw, what I experienced, and it got me through it. Again, it wasn't anything I evaluated or had any sort of analysis at the time, but so that I picked that up as a style and as a mechanism for therapy, I guess, for lack of a better term. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So I got out of the Navy and I went to art school. Since illustration has always been very personal to me, I didn't want to. I really didn't want it to be a profession of mine. I didn't want to get paid to illustrate. It was something. It was like I held it close, and so when I went to art school, this was in the 90s. Digital media was becoming a thing. I learned multimedia. I learned digital video editing and things like that. Things outside of illustration, some animation. But at any rate, fast forward, after I graduated, I started with EY, like I said, 25 years ago. And basically doing interactive proposals. It was a new thing. Digital media was very new at that time. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have laptops. It was interesting how far back we were technology-wise at that time. So this was all very, it was kind of cool and new. And I helped start what was called the new media team in CSG. So I started with CSG, where I was at for about 10 years. So doing web development and also early on, I started working on events, which ultimately led to where I'm at now. But one of the first events that I started being involved with was Entrepreneur of the Year on a regional level here in the Southeast, and then ultimately working on websites and animations for a national program. So, but there was anybody who's not aware of what Entrepreneur of the Year is, I'll just real quickly touch on it. It's basically what we call the Academy Awards for entrepreneurs, and it's generally 8 to 10 categories in various industries. Each of those categories have multiple nominees. So when we have a gala, when we have an event, what we need was imagery of the entrepreneurs to put in print media, to put in the video vignettes, and it's something that's pretty easy to come by nowadays. But at the time, we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have digital cameras were barely out, and those that were out were very low resolution. So we were lucky if we were to get a brochure from a company that may have a little thumbnail of an entrepreneur. So our biggest challenge we had with EOY was getting some consistent imagery across the board of all of the nominees for the program, and being able to really project that and bring it to life in a consistent manner. So that's when I really kind of started delving into getting some involvement with illustration. It just kind of happened by chance. So we came up with the idea, well, if I illustrate all the nominees, we can make sure they're all consistent, right? I can draw them in the same style. And, because we had tried taking the small photographs and applying filters in Photoshop, and none of that. So I started doing creating illustrations of these nominees. And that, as you can see here, this is actually from the World Entrepreneur of the Year that we would utilize. And and some of the print material. And then after we were like, what do we do with the illustrations now? So we decided, okay, we'll just frame the illustrations and we'll give them to the entrepreneurs. So that became another thing that sort of kind of built on itself. So the illustrations, like I said, were used in the print media. They were used in the video vignettes. Sometimes they were, we created images that were posted around the room because that was before we really were able to project a lot. And so here's an image of a winner in the Southeast area with his portrait. So that became, for about 4 or 5 years, that became like a very busy thing for me, because ultimately I was involved with our Southeast area program, with the national program, and and ultimately World EOY. And I would say that here's a few folks that you may have heard of: John Mackey from Whole Foods and the co-founders of Google. So over the course of 4 years or so, I probably did about 400 illustrations of these. Here's just a little screenshot of some of them. But it was funny because I really became a student of my subject, because I would spend 3 or 4 hours on each portrait. And I would really get to know every detail of their face, their structure intimately. One of the funny things I really realized that most people don't even think about is how different everybody's ears are. You just don't really think about that, because why would you? But really just getting to know all the details. So it was really, a big learning experience for me. And if I look at, the first year, the first portrait I drew compared to the very last one, very different. I could really see a progression. I learned a lot about shading. I learned a lot about how, skin reacts to light hitting it, creases in the face. So it was actually a kind of a cool thing to do. And this was kind of on top of my day job, because I was still, creating websites and doing all the new media stuff for CSG. So this was sort of a side gig for about 4 or 5 years. A couple other portraits I did. You probably heard of these guys. And then on top of that, so then I started continuing to do more illustrations, and then if somebody was retiring, that became a big thing. So we need to create so-and-so's retiring. We need to create a caricature, have it printed on a large, print, and have everybody sign it. So I ended up during this time period creating a ton of caricatures. Which was a lot of fun. We would basically I'd get to know that individual. I'd learn about what their hobbies were, what they enjoy doing, what they plan on doing at retirement. And so it was fun to kind of compose these things. So I enjoyed that. So that for the most part is, the bulk of my EY illustration period. I was in CSG, as I said, for about 10 years, and then I moved into production full time. And around this time, and tell me if I'm talking too fast, so I apologize. And feel free to ask any questions as I go along. I'll say that a couple of times. So then I had kids, and that was a whole new era of kind of learning some new things and getting in touch with other creative elements that I'd forgotten, because I love this quote from Picasso: every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up. And from observing, my kids and the interest they had in art and all their friends and everything else, I'm like, wow, this is a thing that's, everybody is innate, the wonderment, the curiosity, and really in kids, the lack of ego. And I think that's where we get stuck as we stop doing art and creating things, whether it's art or creative writing or a lot of things. But it's seeing that lack of ego and that lack of fear, lack of being concerned about what something's going to look like. So I feel like during that period with my kids, I learned a lot from them. We would do these activities and just kind of silly things where we would just like draw a squiggly line and then look at it and say, what does this look like? And it's just just like when we were kids and we're looking at the sky and the clouds and seeing shapes and faces and things like that. So that same kind of wonderment. And I couldn't find anything that we did back then, but this is just like an example. So you just take a squiggly line, you look at it, you kind of turn it around and what can you see, beyond that? So I think one of the things I learned, from my kids is looking beyond just what's in front of you, what's outside of these lines, what do they create, what can they make? So it kind of helped me, kind of build my observational skills. So, and I love being able to learn from, 5-year-olds and things like that, but I feel like there's a lot we can learn from them. The other thing is, every time we'd go to a restaurant, one of the things I still do to this day, because, when the kids were young, they'd always hand you a kid's menu with the crayons. And to this day, I still ask for the kids menu and the crayons. And hopefully I always do that, because that's, I still want to be that person that's scribbling or flipping over the puzzles and drawing on the back side. And I really love it when there's when there's a tablecloth that's made out of paper. We go to these restaurants sometimes, it's a paper tablecloth, and those are the best. And this is something I did recently, actually. My wife and I were out to dinner, and I just scribbled a girl with a flower, but yeah, so I really like that, and this kind of a couple things. It shows that how accessible art is. You can pretty much, you always have something handy to draw with, to draw on. And this also is a little bit about the impermanence of it. This is, because I left the restaurant and who knows what happened to this, but it was the kind of the act of creating it that, that it kind of brings me joy, So that's something that I picked up when I was, from my kids. And again, if I'm ever out to dinner with anybody, you guys, I'm going to be the one that's asking for the kids, menu and the crayons and all that. So hopefully that'll continue on. So that was that period, and that's where I learned a lot from them. And then moving on to getting into production, I started traveling a lot, and for the probably the previous 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I wasn't doing a lot of personal drawing. As you saw, all the EOI images that I was drawing, and I wasn't really doing a lot personally. I was doing some band music posters and things like that, but not a lot. But once I got out on the road, a few months in, I realized it's time to kind of revisit some of those things that I that I was really connected with from a personal level, what really connected me with art from a personal level, years earlier. So I started taking my sketchbook on with me, everywhere I went. So in small sketchbook, a few pencils and pens, and because anybody who's traveled knows that there's so much time that you're stuck in an airport, you're waiting, you have a missed flight, or you have a delayed flight, or there's a ridiculous amount of time that's, what do you do with it? How do you occupy yourself during that time? So it was, honestly, it was something that, was or could have been a challenge and a big frustration with travel, but I turned into like a, creative opportunity. So I started to kind of get creative again and doing some personal things. So this is an image of me I think we can identify with. We were trying to work on an airplane, but this is a typical flight that I think most of us might be familiar with. But then I started kind of getting a little bit out of the box, because most of the stuff I had drawn is, okay, I'm looking at an image, I'm looking at a portrait, I'm drawing that, I'm drawing my environment. But I kind of took a different creative direction. And so this was one of my first trips in production. So I was sitting in a sushi restaurant and just eating sushi, not really thinking about much of anything, just had my sketchbook, and then this drawing sort of evolved. And it's basically, I don't know if you can see it well on the screen, but it's basically a fish eating people, and it's kind of a silly drawing, but it also, I want to say that this became kind of like a journal for me as well. So I was never a big writer, I was never a big journalist, but while I was traveling, and I would illustrate certain things, and it turns out, I can look at every drawing that I did on the road and I know exactly where I was. I know what flight I was on, not what flight number, but I know where I was headed. I know, all the things around that drawing. So for me personally, it did become sort of a travel journal. And so I didn't, that's something I didn't, until I reflected back on it, I didn't really, fully appreciate. But I remember being in a sushi restaurant in Toronto, and I even remember having a little bit of a cold that day. So it's kind of funny how it just helps. There's a lot of, and I'm not going to get into the neurological aspects of art, but it is true that it does enhance memory, enhances a lot of things. I'd like to do a whole nother call on that, about endorphins and dopamine and all that. But there's a lot of examples in my work where I can fully appreciate everything about that time when I did it. Some of these, I went in, I'm a big pencil and paper fan. I don't do a lot of color, but some of my illustrations I have taken into Photoshop and digitally colorized. So this is of something that I've enhanced with color. I cleaned up the font, and I think that says fish eats people, but I have to double check. But it's something to that effect. So this is an example of a little rough sketch on a small piece of paper that I've colorized, and I've got a large print here in my room here. I don't print a lot of this, but thanks, Yoko. So it's confirmed. So okay, and another one. So and another thing about my work is it doesn't it sort of evolves. I rarely sit down and think I'm going to draw this, and this is what the end result's going to look like. Oftentimes, I will just start with something that inspires me. I was on a flight to Beijing, and I was it was a magazine with a photo of Charlize Theron in it, and so I was struck by the photo of her, and I started drawing her face. And I was like, it's okay. It doesn't really do a lot for me. My drawing still felt like it needed a little bit more. So I just kind of kept sort of doodling out. So ultimately, it became Medusa. And there's a lot of kind of repetitive things that you'll see, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But how things relate to each other and intertwine and things like that. But this was my Medusa sketch, and another one where I ultimately ended up, scanning in and colorizing in Photoshop. So I will say something else too. So somebody had asked on a previous call. I did this for APAC last night, and how long certain things take and so forth. But I got to a point when I was traveling where I would basically time box it. If I was traveling, from London to the States, I would have X amount of hours. I'll say I'm going to take that time. I'm going to draw this picture, and I'm not going to revisit it. I'm going to be done with it. If I'm flying to Asia and back, it's that's how much time I've got to work on this. So I kind of work. I didn't consciously think about that all the time, but usually when I got in a plane and we were taking off, I would just kind of put that in my head. So some of those on the longer flights are going to be a little bit more detailed. So another one here, I'm going to show you some examples. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them, but I have a whole huge portfolio of things, scribbles that I've done along the way. I just pulled out a few selections just to kind of highlight that kind of moved me a little bit. This is another one where I had a lot of time to do some detail, and this was actually, again, there was an image of an actress, Christina Ricci, in a black leather jacket that kind of struck me, and I really liked the way the light was hitting the black leather, and so I wanted to, going back to that style, that I learned way back in 1986, that pointillism, and see if I could bring out that texture using that particular style. Another good thing about the dots in traveling, you'll see I do a lot of the dots when I'm traveling, is that it's random. And so it's not, if I'm hitting turbulence or something like that. I'm not worried about a line, going all over the place. So by just doing the dots, it's if I mess up, you don't really know because it's again, it's just kind of all over the place anyway. So another one that sort of evolved where it was basically Christina Ricci in a black leather jacket. I felt like it needed a little bit more. I'd seen something recently on Day of the Dead, so I brought her face I created a Day of the Dead on her face. But then something about the black leather jacket just felt matrixy to me. So then I just started doing the matrix numbers down the on the vertical line, and this is another one that took a ridiculous amount of time. Do the numbers represent? I don't know. The numbers might represent something. I gotta look and see. That part I don't remember. But yeah, so another one where I did have a lot of time to really go in and do those details. Again, the process was very therapeutic. It's all very repetitive, and it's something I'll talk about in a little bit. This is just a sketch that I did, but I was on the way to London, and just a pencil sketch. I just threw it in there because I like that sketch or something about it. But the next one, talking about journaling. This is I was basically sitting in an airline club, having a cup of Starbucks, looking outside in the rain. That was basically it, and I had a Starbucks logo on the cup. It was raining outside. I just juxtaposed those elements. I think I had a delayed flight. I knew I had some time. So I just basically, sketched that out. And yeah, so it's a memory, and it's basically a journal. It basically there's a lot in this picture that brings back memory, exactly where I was, what I was doing, delayed flight, the rain, all that. But I like its I like its kind of simplicity. This one is this was a statue, and it's in Monaco. We're at World EOY, and this in and of itself, the photograph of it is amazing. It really captivated me, and I remember it was the last day. We're leaving the next day, and we'd walk by it every day, and I snapped a photo with my phone, and just the folds of the fabric in the statue was really struck me, and so I couldn't really get it out of my head. I'm a big fan of Renaissance, statues and sculptures and Michelangelo and a lot of that work from back then. It did remind me of that. So and I like the contrast of the folds and that sort of thing. So this was, to me, very very therapeutic project to work on, and so this is something that this actually took a couple of flights to finish up. But again, you can see the randomness of the dots, and so it's I could do like a whole class on the dots, because it's really anybody can really learn that technique. But yeah, this is one that I really like. All right, so this is one, and I don't have music playing, but this is Nancy's favorite. But so as I said, most of my drawings were or pen and paper. I do like that experience, but on occasion I've ventured out to digital medium. So this was, I just got an iPad and an Apple Pen, and there was I think it was a free program, but it's a program called Procreate. So if anybody is an artist out there and you're playing around with iPad apps, Procreate is a really nice and easy to use app. It's very simple. It's just brush size, color, and blending, essentially. I'm a big Charlie Chaplin fan, so I wanted to kind of experiment with that. What I do like about this is the richness, of the blacks I can get on the digital medium, and the contrast between the blacks, and the whites. So So I did enjoy working on this piece. I haven't really done anything since from a digital standpoint, but I did appreciate the process. I probably will do some more. The funny thing is, you're watching an animation of it. I after I completed the drawing, I went to just export the picture, but I didn't. I was caught by surprise and said, you can export the whole movie. So I didn't realize when I was creating it that it actually captured every single pen stroke that I did, or even mistakes and everything. And so I was able to export the whole movie, which was kind of cool. And I'll put this. We'll send this out after the session, and it does have music to it. So of course I put some Charlie Chaplin music behind it as well. So this is something else where, going back to what, I learned from my kids, and that's, really kind of learning to look a little bit deeper at things and to appreciate my surroundings a little bit more. This was basically, we were on a cruise a few years ago, and I was sitting on a lounger by the pool. My son was up on a water slide, and it's just kind of a mundane thing. It's a water slide. But there was something about the way that the curvatures of the stairs, the way the sun was shining on it, the juxtaposition, between the kind of the roundness of the slide itself and the harder parts of the stairs, just the way the whole thing was composed, it just kind of visually struck me. So this is the piece I really like, just because it's not something that I guess I would normally think to draw, but the vantage point where I was sitting and the way it looked where I was sitting, it kind of moved me a little bit. So I spent a couple of days drawing that from that vantage point, soaking up the sun. Next is a little bit about stream of consciousness. Sometimes it's just fun to just draw the first thing that comes to mind, and this is I didn't have this in initially, but this is it's a silly drawing, and it's literally called "Man with Lego Hands on a Spring." Totally doesn't mean anything, but it was just kind of again another flight I was on, I think to New York at the time, but I just wanted to kind of draw something. I'm like, I don't know what to draw. I'll just kind of draw the first thing that came to my mind. I may have seen a Lego somewhere, or my kid had a Lego. But I think that's one of the fun things I get out of drawing, is that you don't have to have like a writer's block or anything like that. It's just you can just draw the first thing that comes to mind, and just start building from there. So it's maybe I stepped on a Lego. That could have been what happened. But it's so it's just I think it's fun going through that journey, especially when I don't even know where it's going to end. You just just to start drawing. And I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but there's a great book called The Artist's Way by Julie Cameron, and I'll put this in the file that we send out. But she's got an exercise to kind of help tap into your creativity, and it's a writing exercise, which I had this book years ago, and Barbara, So, but there's an exercise in it where you wake up in the morning, before you even get out of bed. Write 3 pages of just stream of consciousness, and you think, what am I going to write? I'm going to wake up, I have no idea what to write. And the interesting thing about that exercise is you just start writing whatever random thing, and then it really builds on itself, and you find that you're like, wow, there's tons of stuff. You don't have to think about anything specific, but you'll be surprised at what you can get out of some of those exercises. And so I kind of building on that, I sometimes do the same thing with art, and I'll just start drawing something mundane and just whatever, and something builds out of it. So it's fun. How are we doing on time? I think we're good. So I don't want to go to a whole lot of detail on this. So, but one of the things that's sort of common in a lot of my drawings is, as I talked about prior, is repetitive patterns, and I don't know if you guys have seen, but over the past 10 years, Zen doodles, doodling, all this stuff has become pretty popular. Us folks in the U.S. received a coloring book with mandalas and things like that. it's become a big thing from a therapeutic aspect, and it's something that's it's been really scientifically proven that a lot of these these repetitive doodling, it's not a mindless thing. It's something that that we do benefit from, that we do have neurological benefits from, and it's no real coincidence to me that over the past 10 years we've seen mindfulness, which is thousands of years old, but really become huge in our culture. Doodling's become huge in our culture, and I kind of see those interwoven. How I approach drawing and doodling, and I think it's no coincidence that this is all happening at the same time technology has advanced the way it has been. We've we're accessible 24/7. The levels of stress that we're dealing with now on a daily basis is intense. So the fact that technology is going up at the same time that we're all trying to become better aware of how we balance things out with mindfulness and creativity. It's kind of there to balance each other out, I think. So, and I could have a whole nother kind of talk about that, but I truly believe that there's a lot that we can benefit from, from these simple little things around doodling. And I don't want to go through this whole slide. I don't want to read through it. This will be I'll send this out. This is basically the 5 characteristics of mindfulness, but every single one of those are how I approach art. And beginner's mind is important, and that's going back to being a child again, and non-attachment and non-judging. All of these things are totally and 100% applicable to delving into creativity. I think we all have a block. We certainly, like I said before, once we get to a certain age, we start getting that ego. We start getting concerned about how things will be judged and so forth. So I definitely would encourage folks to kind of step outside of the boundaries that that we've kind of created, and kind of revisit some of those kind of kid style senses of wonderment. And part of that, and this is something I did recently, and it was again, this was me saying I don't think I could ever do this. I've always thought about doing it, but when I was a kid, I would write my name. I would write my name with my right hand, my dominant hand, but I found that I could write it backwards, mirror it basically with my left hand. And it's it's pretty common to be able to do that. If you guys try that. I'd never tried it with a drawing, although for literally decades I've thought about it, but I'm like, well, I'm not gonna be able to do that. But so a couple of weeks ago, I said, what the hell? I mean, I'll give it a shot. I'll record it. If it sucks, it sucks. And but so this was my attempt of drawing Caesar from Planet of the Apes. I of course had to draw something symmetrical, and this is really a lot of people say, wow, you can do stuff with your left hand and your right. I can't really call this ambidextrous. This is mirroring my right hand. I'm focusing on my right hand, and my left hand is following along. And there was definitely quite a few in there, but it was a great exercise, I think, to just to step out of what my own boundaries were. And see if there was something I could push it and go a little bit beyond. So, and I've got music on this too. I wasn't able to get the music to work in the coming through my speakers. But yeah. So this is so I guess this kind of is a little bit about where I am right now is because I do sometimes get locked in. I think we all do get locked into doing those things that are comfortable. I'm used to doing this. Are you? Oh yeah, Shannon, that's the next one. But kind of stepping out, and pushing myself a little bit more to kind of go beyond what's comfortable. I've got styles, I've got things that I know that I can go to and do. But right now, I'm in a mode where I want to expand on that and kind of, grow a little bit artistically. One of the things as a student of art, one of the main things the instructors start you off with, is a contour exercise, and that's basically drawing something without picking up the pen. A blind contour is something that's very common, and that's when you're looking at a subject and you're drawing something without picking up the pen or pencil, but and it usually doesn't look good, but it teaches you to really see and like look at every little detail of what you're what you're observing and what you're drawing. But the contour drawing is a common exercise. I enjoy contour drawing, and back when I was a kid, I used to love these little getting etch-a-sketches and drawing with an etch-a-sketch, because that's, as we all know, it's a contour drawing. You can't lift the pen and put it back down, and so it's kind of a side thing. But I haven't done etch-a-sketch, and I haven't created anything with an etch-a-sketch in a while. But I was recently watching the Frank Zappa documentary, and so so this is my recent etch-a-sketch. So this is again, a contour drawing. So the interesting thing about etch-a-sketch is you have to really learn to go back over lines, to get where you want to be. But the one thing I enjoy about the etch-a-sketch is it's that, like it says here, it's the journey, not the destination. It's it really is about creating that piece of work and going through that journey, creating it, and then shaking it up and doing something different. But I do enjoy the etch-a-sketch from time to time, just because I think art is three things really, but it's the journey. It's a couple of things. It's really the execution of the art, the process of doing it. I don't think a lot about what the end result's going to be, but I really like the process of creating the art. But I think that the main thing is how one of the things, I'm going to back up a little bit because I don't know if I really touched on it, but one of the biggest things with art, and I did sort of touch on it when I was talking about my kids, was really how we see things and how we learn to see things a little bit differently. One of the things I'm going to show you my very last piece right here that I just finished a few days ago, and one of the things is that I'm kind of studying right now is really looking at light, how light affects objects and things like that. So this is my most recent drawing I did. It's a pencil drawing, which is basically a value study. It's a little statue that we have on our windowsill in our kitchen. But I was looking the other day, and I was really appreciating how the sunlight was hitting it, and it kind of spoke to me a little bit. So so I wanted to really kind of get into and really spend time on that, on how to really kind of build those values and see how those contrasts work, with the lightest light against the darkest dark. And I was actually inspired, and we talked a little bit about this on the call last night, but I was inspired by an Instagram artist, a pencil artist, and I really, really like her work. And I'll share some of these in the kind of post communication. But I reached out to her. I'm like, really like your stuff. What kind of pencils are you using? What kind of paper are you using? And she was real cool and got back to me. And so I basically took everything she had. I was inspired by what she did, inspired by how she manages values, and I created that. And that's one thing that we're kind of blessed to have that opportunity these days, to have so much at our disposal, when it comes to creative inspiration. We've got Instagram, we've got tons of websites out there, and so there's no shortage, there's no excuse, why we can't be, inspired, and share what we're doing and learn more about what other people are doing, whether it's being inspired by an artist or going on YouTube and learning a particular technique, learning how mindfulness kind of, lends itself to the creative process. So I think that there's a lot of craziness going on right now, but I think that there's a lot of beautiful things going on right now as far as our accessibility, to this kind of, creative journey that we all, can choose to go on. So So I think that's, we need to just kind of take advantage of what we have at our disposal. And again, I'm talking about illustration. There's so many things out there that can build those kind of, neurological, sort of, beneficial things, whether it's writing or sports or whatever. But I encourage people to have some outlet. It makes a difference. I like drawing because it's accessible. There's always a piece of paper. There's always a pen or pencil, no matter where you are. So that's kind of my medium of choice. But I enjoy it, and I appreciate the time to kind of talk a little bit about my creative journey. And anybody have any particular questions?
This was so good, Robert. I'm gonna pull out my my pens and my pencils again, I think.
Yeah, this is Laura, I totally agree. I'm retired, sort of. And I said I need other things to do, and I did read The Artist Way, and then Julia Cameron has another book called It's Never Too Late to Begin Again. And I got it because I was retired, but anybody could be inspired by it. And she talks about having an artist date once a week to do something different, something that you'd never think to do. And I recently got You Can Draw in 30 days. And
Yep.
You've inspired me to go back to it, but it's amazing. It's a very gentle way to learn. And he talks about the shadowing and building different things. And it's having that beginner's mind and not being afraid to screw it up. It doesn't really matter what it looks like.
Absolutely, and that's the key. It's the mindset, and I'm learning every day. I'm continuing to learn, and I think somebody asked me last night, is it an innate thing? Is it a learned thing? And it may be a little bit of both, but like I said before, when I first started illustrating the portraits for EOI, compared to what I did at the end, that was all like learning technique and just learning light and all of that stuff. So I think we can all. There's so much that anybody can do, and on a very basic level, just to learn the basic aspects of drawing and illustration. And I'm happy to. I want to if anybody has anything specific that they want to reach out to me about anything about how to get started or anything I've talked about, I'm happy to share tricks, tools, techniques, websites. Spend some time with you one-on-one. I like it. It's very therapeutic for me, and I love talking about it.
I have a question for you, quickly, and I'm sorry for the timing. Do you have any recommendations, like, for doing family art drawing, like a night?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, when you say family, or what age groups are you talking about?
You're looking from a 2-year-old all the way to a 10-year-old.
Yeah, I can share some things with you. I mean, a lot of it's just kind of coming up with a topic, because I think art is about interpreting things.
Correct.
How a 2-year-old interprets something is going to be different and that's kind of the fun part about it. So you could have them do individual drawings to where they're interpreting a scenario or something like emotion. Think about an emotion, but there's also things you can do to create collective art, a singular piece of work where you're working on the same thing. Like a mandala is a very common thing where it's just simple shapes, where everybody gets to pick a circle and then they add their little part and you build on it, and collectively you're working on this one piece, and then you can color it and so forth. But there's a few things you can do to really kind of come together. I could share some things with you. I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, thank you so much for this. And I also wanted to say thank you to Nancy. It's great that Procurement's built in time during our day to do something like this. I mean, I wasn't sure what to expect, but this was a great way to to just take my mind off of everything else. And Robert, your presentation was just beautiful. Thank you so much.
Agreed.
And I have to give credit to Nancy in a big way because she was up at what 2 or 3 a.m. With APAC last night. So that was amazing.
Yeah.
So
I think, Robert, there was a couple of other comments in the chat. Rocky was asking, have your kids picked up your talent?
My son has picked up music. So he is, his creative outlet is music. So my daughter is very much creative from an interior designer standpoint. So she's not so I will say that they have created the appreciation for having a creative outlet, not using the same medium as I use, but I'm hoping that we've kind of been on this journey together, and so my son, just like I talk about art is about seeing, he's taking that same thing with music, because music is very synonymous, and music is about hearing and listening, and it's about technique, but it's so there's a lot of correlations between the visual art and music. So he's taken that path, but it's still a lot of synonymous creative aspects between the two.
Does anyone have any more questions that they'd like to pose to Robert? No, nothing else. So before closing the call, I would really, like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy day. We do hope that you have enjoyed the session. Special thanks to Bob for sharing your illustration and creative journey with us today. You've blown everyone away with your talent, that's for sure. I, for one, have to admit that I have no talent for drawing whatsoever, but I'll never look at a scribble the same way again. And you've challenged me to challenge myself to change that into something more creative. Who knows, I might even take you up on the table colour challenge next time I'm in a restaurant, but I guess I need to be careful, make sure it's paper and I don't end up with a dry cleaning bill. So everyone on the call, please do reach out if you or any of your colleagues would like to host a future Exuberant Bite. We want to obviously explore these sessions more, and we look forward to hearing from you all with some suggestions for the future. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again, Robert, for sharing this wonderful talent that you've got with us today. Thanks a lot, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
everyone. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks. Bye.